Welcome in. My name's Sam Skaggs with the Kentucky High School Hockey League, social media director, and we're here with Mr. Cory Day, head coach for the Lexington Thoroughbreds out of the Central Kentucky Hockey Association. So, thanks very much.
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
you agreeing to meet me out here. So, can you share a little bit about your background in hockey? Kind of how'd you get involved, and then fast forward to
Yeah.
now.
Grew up Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's a town in northern Indiana, home of the Fort Wayne Comets. That's kind of how I got into it. Went to my first Comet game, I think, when I was, 6 days old, my mom said. Just fell in love with the sport. My older brother actually played as well. So, by the time I could walk, I wanted to be in skates. Started skating when I was 3 years old. Just played, travel hockey from the time I was about 6, 7 through U18. Came down to Kentucky and played at UK, and then just kind of stuck around afterwards. So,
How'd you like about UK?
yeah, UK was fun. I came down to Kentucky for reasons other than hockey. Actually, when I first came, I didn't know Kentucky actually had a hockey team. Came to a game, saw the atmosphere. Had never played in an environment like that before. So just kind of wanted to keep playing something outside of men's league. Kentucky was the way to do that. Had a great, 4-year experience, made a lot of friendships, a lot of good memories. We didn't win a lot of games, but we had a lot of fun. So,
How'd you kind of get into coaching?
So when I finished up with UK, I still wanted to kind of be involved with them at the time. So I had asked Tim Pergram, who was the head coach at the time, still the head coach now, if they needed, any help or whatever. And I kind of came on board as kind of a third assistant, just kind of helping, push pucks around the ice. That kind of developed into more of a role, helping with the power play, penalty kill over the next couple of years. Did that for about 3 seasons. Up and through the COVID year, and then kind of stepped away, wanted to take some time off, kind of figure out what I wanted in life outside of hockey, and then, got the itch a couple years later, and that's kind of where the story starts to get into coaching youth hockey. So,
What lessons from your ACHA Division II hockey level playing days do you carry maybe into coaching now?
yeah, there's a lot of lessons, not necessarily that I, took from UK, but just from my career in general. Played for, a handful of good coaches, handful of bad coaches. You just kind of take a little, bits and pieces out of everybody you learn from. But the biggest thing is just to have fun. At the end of the day, hockey's a game. It's a sport. Don't take it too seriously. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be played with, positive attitude and fun. And that's really one thing I found playing at UK again was, even though we didn't win a lot of games, kind of rekindled my love for the game. When I first came to Kentucky, kind of just, was going to school, took a year off. It had some issues health-wise, concussion-wise, my last couple of years of youth hockey. So just kind of took some time off. But then, 6 months, went by and I was like, man, I really miss hockey. So kind of just gave me a new, renowned love for the game. It's probably the biggest lesson outside of, just having fun and, enjoy it while it lasts type of thing.
Yeah. What's your coaching philosophy when working with high school players at this stage of their hockey careers? Because you're going to have some players who this is fun and this is what they do right now, but then you also have some that really want to go on to juniors or to, maybe stay here for a little while, go to maybe a 18U AAA and then to juniors, then collegiately.
Yeah. You kind of have to find a fine line between, how hard you can push the kids that are, just kind of playing it for fun and how hard you can push the kids that, maybe want it a little bit more. So it's a delicate balance, but ultimately, doing what we can, preaching hard work because, hockey teaches a lot of life lessons, that you'll carry on later in life once you're done with, school and whatnot. So just really pushing hard work, effort, discipline. Those are the biggest things I would call my philosophy, so to say.
How would you say you help players stay motivated and improve when really hockey in Kentucky is still growing as compared to hockey in traditional hockey states?
Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to the same sentiment. You can push kids as hard, as they want to give, type of thing. You kind of gotta nod and prod a little bit. Find out, who really wants to play it. Maybe after high school, who's just kind of playing it now because they've enjoyed playing it when they grow up. So it's kind of, like I said previously, a delicate balance, but really the cohesiveness and trying to establish a main goal at the end of the year and get everybody on board is probably the biggest thing. Obviously, everybody wants to win the state tournament at the end, and that's kind of our big motivator. We've had really good success getting everybody on board the last couple of years, and looking for the same this year. So.
Well, let's switch over to program specific with the Thoroughbreds. How would you describe the culture of the Thoroughbreds program?
Yeah, I mean, culture is built, from the bottom up. It's not just, at the high school level or whatever. I feel like in CKHA, within the hockey community here, along with the hockey community as a whole, it's very tight-knit. You're going to go places, as you move further on, you're going to meet people from different places, and there's always likely to be a connection. There's always somebody that knows somebody that So it's very tight knit. I think the culture, is really improving within CKHA over the last couple years. Just trying to establish more of a presence, get more kids involved, and build the program up to the number we'd like to see it at.
What core values would you want your players to carry with them on and off the ice?
Yeah, a couple things that I already mentioned. Hard work, discipline, respect for the game, those within the game, those outside of the game, and just teaching them, not only to be good hockey players but good human beings. Have respect for people. Be courteous. Those sorts of things. Life gets tough at times. It may not seem that way, as a 16 or 17-year-old kid. You just go to school, you talk to girls, you play hockey. Like, life seems pretty easy. But, once you go to college, things get a little more difficult. But then once you get churned into the real world, that's where things really, reality starts to kick in. Like, hey, I got to work the rest of my life. So instilling those values of hard work, dedication, drive, those things will get you far in life. Not just, in hockey, but in a career. If you set goals, do, things to achieve those goals, set expectations, those sorts of things, it can carry you pretty far. So.
Well, like kind of segueing into that, how would you say you build leadership within the team, especially from your captains and your upperclassmen, as opposed to those just coming on to the junior varsity and varsity teams?
Yeah, so leadership is kind of a funny thing. I don't think you can necessarily teach. You can teach somebody to be a leader, but people that are leaders naturally, I feel like, have that in them. Obviously, you want to promote a collectiveness and a cohesiveness, and it starts with the upperclassmen. The upperclassmen also lead, the charge and the buy-in of the things that you're, instilling at practice, systems, the things you're trying to, implement for games, practices. They set the tone for effort. They set the tone for the expectation. They also kind of facilitate a way between the players and the coaches. So we kind of look for in practice guys that kind of step up, lead by example, not just, talking about it, but actually being about it. So you can kind of foster it a little bit, but I think leadership is something that, naturally kind of occurs, and you kind of get a feel of who has it and who doesn't.
With CKHA, like a couple of other programs within our state, it's an association, so you have a lot of kids coming from different schools and kind of just combining.
Yeah.
How do you foster that unity as a team as a whole?
Yeah, so it's tough with kids kind of all spread out over the city, going to various different high schools and whatnot. But try to bring everybody together within the team. Have some team building events at the start of the year. Most of these kids have been playing together for several years at least. So there is some familiarity there. There is some friendship already there. So we don't have to really foster a lot of it. But really trying to get everybody on board, doing those kind of team building activities at the beginning of the year and into the early part of the year kind of helps, with the overall growth of the team.
What do you see now, kind of as the season's starting to come underway? What would you say one of the strengths of this year's roster would be for CKHA?
Yeah. So right now, we're a couple weeks in. It's tough to really say. Don't want to divulge too much, but I think we've got a relatively young team, relatively inexperienced. We lost a lot of key pieces from last year's team, so those guys are going to be hard to replace. But we have some up and coming kids that were around last year and that are moving up from 14U and whatnot that have some big shoes to fill. So we've set those expectations for those kids. I think there's some of those kids that want to be that next wave. So I think we're going to be pretty fast. And we're going to play hard. Ultimately, we're going to play hard.
Awesome. How important is the CKHA program in developing young players and feeding talent up into the high school level? Because you had talked about 14U and a little bit younger.
Yeah, it's paramount. Obviously, hockey is a sport that it's much harder to pick up the older you are. Not to say you can't, but starting at learn to play 4, 5, 6 years old, and then getting into 8U, 10U, 12U, 14U. It all kind of stacks on each other. So if you can get them in the organization early, get them playing, build that love for the game, I feel like that's the best way to retain kids, move them up the ladder to eventually come to us at the high school level. So starts from the bottom, just getting people in, getting people trying, through Learn to Play, Try Hockey for Free, those sorts of events, and then, hoping a couple stick and they continue to just climb the ladder up until they reach high school.
So how do you collaborate at that level, like with you being at the varsity coach and then the subsequent years of, the JV has a different coach, 14U a different coach. How do you collaborate with them as far as maybe drawing up a game plan for development? Are you already kind of starting to maybe eyeball a little?
Yeah, it's not a lot of like game planning. Our CKHA president actually has done a pretty good job of trying to bring in some fresh faces in coaching, some guys that have played, hockey at a semi-high level with good knowledge of the game to kind of come in and coach at these different levels. So we're all kind of in tune with one another. We're all, at the rink, 3, 4, 5 nights a week. We see each other, in the coach's room, in practice. We even all probably play men's league together. So there's a collectiveness, and we're all really on board with what we're trying to build as a whole within the organization. I don't think there needs to be too much collaboration between, say, what systems we're running at 10U and what we're doing at the high school level. But it's just preparing kids to, move up to that next level when that time comes.
So keeping them engaged. So how would you, off the ice, keep maybe families engaged and, and fans engaged in the program?
Yeah, just doing, some community events. We're trying to establish more traffic into the organization, getting kids to start, try hockey for free, learn to play, getting kids to come out, try it, and then just keeping families involved. There's a lot that goes on into running an organization. I'm just a very small part of it. There's, many different volunteer pieces and whatnot and board positions that, members of the hockey community fulfill. And just getting, knowledge out there about the organization and hosting those community events and hosting those organizational events, I think goes a long way.
Taking things into a bigger perspective here, what are some of the challenges of building and maintaining a competitive high school program in the state? So in Kentucky, in conjunction with the other programs that are.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is actually probably just competition with other sports. Hockey's not a big thing in Kentucky. I wouldn't call Kentucky a hockey hotbed. There's a lot of talent here. that people don't necessarily recognize. But kids at a young age, they play soccer, they play football, they play baseball, they play lacrosse, stuff like that. So I think competing with other sports is probably the hardest thing. It's very rare to have a kid, that only plays hockey. So if you can, obviously you hope that they continue on to play hockey, but, there's times where 10, 12 years old, they realize, I don't really want to play hockey anymore. So they move on to football or soccer or whatever. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is just competing with those other larger, well-known sports in the area.
Well, you kind of took my other question away, so we'll just kind of move on. I was going to ask you about competing with the other sports, but a big thing, it seems to be, with some other coaches I've talked to and some other programs, is ice availability. So, that can sometimes really be a challenge in Kentucky. So how would you balance practice and then games, from an effective standpoint?
Yeah, so we get quite a few practice hours, actually. We get about 3.5 to 4 hours a week, which, from my understanding, is quite the increase over the last couple of years. The rink has done a pretty good job of providing the organization with ice. I don't think it's necessarily here in Lexington about availability. It's more about cost. It's rather expensive to rent an hour of ice, as it is, I'm sure, in other places. So that's probably the biggest cost setback, you could say. But the rink has done a really good job of giving us, quality ice slots and enough ice slots to kind of balance, our practice schedule, as well as being able to, host 15 to 18 home games. They're bringing a lot of tournaments to town, so the ice is there. It's just about utilizing it. So obviously we emphasize when we're on the ice, we want to make the most of it, because those hours are, somewhat limited, as opposed to, maybe being in Minnesota where you can jump on the ice, every morning for 2 hours before school. So.
Got it. Big question. What do you think it would take to continue growing hockey in the state as a whole, just different demographics and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's just more overall knowledge of the sport. In Kentucky, not many people know, that there is hockey. Obviously, people hear of the Blue Jackets, and they are somewhat familiar with the Predators and those NHL teams or whatever. But I've ran into so many people in, day to day, that I tell, I coach hockey, and they're like, they don't even know that there's a rink in Lexington. So I think just getting, word of mouth out to, schools and local organizations, and trying to develop, ways to get kids to try hockey, whether that be, street hockey or floor hockey in gym class, those sorts of things. Just kind of bring more knowledge, since there's not, a local pro team or even a local semi-pro team that, kids can kind of look up to. So in that sense, it's difficult, but there are ways to kind of combat it as best you can.
So, kind of got 2 or 3 more questions for you here. Where do you see, and where would you like to see the Thoroughbreds program maybe in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, 3 to 5 years. I mean, long-term goal, obviously you want to see the organization continue to grow, not only on like a skill basis, but a numbers basis. Would love to get to the point where we, each team, each age group has, 2 teams full of 20 kids. Is that, necessarily attainable? I think so. It's just going to take some work to get there. So I think, 3 to 5 years, just keeping kids involved, keeping kids engaged, and bringing new kids and new families in the door is the biggest thing. The challenge isn't, retaining them necessarily. It's getting them in and getting them started.
So beyond wins and losses, what are some goals you have for your players for the upcoming season?
Yeah, I just want our kids to work hard, have fun, and I want them to grow, not only as players, but as people throughout the year. Hockey is a game where you'll face adversity, you'll face challenges. You have to learn how to handle those sorts of things. Not everything in life is easy. Not everything in hockey is easy. So we're gonna continue to push those buttons of those kids to try to make them, better players and better humans along the way.
Okay, so for the last thing, you maybe look at the camera, but if you could send one message to players considering joining the Thoroughbreds hockey organization in the future, what would be your recruiting pitch, if you will?
My recruiting pitch. Just come out and try it. At least one time, come out, skate. It's not always easy when you first get out there. You fall a lot. We have these Tri-Hike Review events and stuff, and I'm always out there telling these kids, asking, if they had fun, and they say, yeah, but I fell a lot. So, you're gonna have your falls, you're gonna have your, ups and downs. It's gonna be hard to get started, but once you get started, hockey, I think, is the greatest sport in the world. I've met, lifelong friends that I've known from the time I was 4 years old that I'm still, friends with 20 plus years later. So it's a tight-knit community, and, you'll leave with lasting memories.
Awesome. Cory, Coach Day, really appreciate you coming out. And thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Thanks for having me.